Good morning and welcome to Hillhurst United Church. My name is John Pentland, one of the ministers at Hillhurst United Church, and with me is
Sheena Trotter-Dennis,
one of the ministers here in our community. It's Mother's Day. My mother is in Toronto. Where's your mom today?
Ripon, California.
Ripon, California. Some people have mothers sitting beside them. Some have mothers who have died, and their presence is still among them. What is Mother's Day about today as you think about worship, Sheena?
Well, Mother's Day is one of those holidays that's really quite layered. It's not black and white for anybody, I don't think. There's layers of grief maybe, or joy, or comfort, or sadness, or annoyance, or whatever it is, right, that we put on the day or we take from the day. But it's also, I think you were mentioning it the other day, like one of the highest holy days in the Christian church, right? People come out for Mother's Day for some reason. They want to be with their mothers or connect in some way.
Yeah, they say Christmas, Easter, and Mother's Day in that order. So we're really glad that you've decided to join us this morning on Mother's Day. And as we were saying last week, there's lots of images of God in Scripture, and one of them indeed is mother, like a nursing mother. So
Or a mother hen.
Or a mother hen, yes. And the spirit is feminine, too. So anyway, we're so glad you're here. The banner says, whoever you are, wherever you're at, join us on the journey, and you have chosen to virtually, wherever you are in the world, we welcome you. Please type in where you're at so we know where you're at in the world. Four core practices, hospitality. Today is self-serve. Self-serve your own coffee or tea or orange juice or whatever beverage suits your worship time. Eating and drinking changes us, and we recognize that this is a gift of God, the hospitality that God provides for us. Second is spirituality. There are so many opportunities online to connect, and I want to encourage you to do that, whether it's a daily meditation or a Wednesday morning or Wednesday evening or a Monday evening spiritual nurture or a book study on Wednesday or right relations work or LGBTQ opportunities. There are so many ways to learn and grow. Spirituality is so important to us. A lot of people say they're not religious, and I believe that is true. There lots aren't, but spirituality is something we all share, our breath and who we are as people. The third practice is social justice. Again, go to the website, opportunities to be active and take what happens Sunday morning out into the world. And the final practice is risk. It's risky these days. I don't know what you're seeing. What are you seeing when you're out in the world these days that speaks of risk, perhaps?
Well, I see people out and about. That's always risky these days. I see people still helping one another. I'm out in the grocery stores, like carefully seeing what steps they're going to take next.
Yeah, and things have changed a bit in the last week. I think that's been some good news, but also risky as we try to move with safety and caution for each other. It's also risky to enter a church, and we want to affirm that this is an affirming church for over 10 years. We welcome people for whom they felt church wasn't an option for them. We welcome people regardless of age, gender, sexual orientation, race, economic status, and welcome you to this place virtually and know that you belong here. This is a welcoming, inclusive community, and everyone belongs, whoever you are, wherever you're at. So we're really glad for the leadership of Sheena and those exciting guests you're going to hear from today. Welcome to Hillhurst. You belong here, and may this be a great day for you and for all of us as we recharge and step into a new week.
Each week when we come together as the Hillhurst congregation, it's important for us to acknowledge that we gather on the traditional territories of the people of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. We share this land now because of Treaty 7, and this acknowledgement is a reminder that we too are treaty people. Our ancestors made promises on our behalf generations ago, promises that we must now live up to. We know people are joining us online from outside Calgary or southern Alberta or even across the country and beyond. Wherever you live, we encourage you to recognize the traditional lands that you live on and to remember the original peoples of your area. We recognize that this land was not empty when Europeans first arrived in what Indigenous people call Turtle Island. We remember the actions of the church on this land, both for good and for ill. We are called to find the courage now to speak the truth about these actions as we seek to create new relationships in the spirit of reconciliation. May we live with respect on this land and in peace and friendship with all our relations.
Well, the weather this past week has helped lift our spirits, I think. People getting outside, whether it's on their bike or walking or working in their garden, the warmth of the sun helps us as the earth awakens. And so we come into this week grateful for this past week. We also recognize this past week has been a difficult time for some. Perhaps they've heard news of illness or brokenness or even death in their family or their circle of community. And so as we come, we recognize that as a church, the ongoing life and work of the church continues. The masks of hope we've been providing will be out front later this week. You'll get a notice about when that is possible to come to that. The ongoing programming throughout the week and the pastoral care, all of this is supported by your gift. And so we encourage you to make an offering online as a way of supporting the life and work of our church. As we come to this week where there's been a little bit of opening, we give thanks for respectful social distancing, thanking the essential workers, those who are providing for us in medical care or health care or in our stores. We also remember that this week would normally be when we would have our musical. And so we hold in prayer this day the memory of the past 10 years of work together in musicals. So we bring together our joys and our sorrows when we come to prayer. It's not about getting the right words, it's rather about a posture of openness. It's a letting go. It is allowing our heart to beat with the Creator's. And so as we come to prayers this day, I invite you to remember in particular the people of Nova Scotia, people who have died and gone before us, those yet born, and indeed all of our relations. Will you please join me in the words as we share them together this day? Spirit of life, we recognize the challenge of this day, for the expectation and hopes, for the joy and the sorrow, for the pain and the promise. Breathe into us your hope, your compassion, your nurturing spirit, your unending seeking of justice. Mothering God, may we dare to love and care for one another as you have loved and cared for us. We gather these prayers trusting that we are loved, forgiven, and set free as we sing the words Jesus invited us to live.
This is from the Gospel of John, chapter 14, verses 1 to 4. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you?
And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be, and you know the way to the place where I am going to be.
Good morning.
It's so good to be with you, even if it is just virtually. We have been gathering each Sunday, just like you have, in our living room, gathered around our iPad to watch our worship service and to be in community with you. And it is good to be together again this Sunday. Of course, it's Mother's Day. And, I was thinking about it and thinking if it was a Facebook status, it would be, it's complicated, right? It's a complicated holiday. It has lots of layers of meaning and layers of emotions that come with this day. And we might have joy and we might have comfort, but we also might have sadness or anger or disappointment. And we bring all that to the table this morning. I was thinking about the original story of Mother's Day, and it's a much more inspiring story than how we might celebrate it today. It's a story of a woman named Anne Jarvis who was alive in the middle of the 19th century in the US. And as she was living in her community, she began realizing that there was a real problem with inequity of healthcare and nutrition and access to things. And what she began to see was a high level of infant mortality in her neighborhood. And so she sought to address this. She herself had lost several children, and she wanted to make things better for her neighbors and for women and children that she knew. And so she gathered women together in small groups in different cities around her, and she began to organize them, and they began to address some of these issues. They worked with women who had tuberculosis at the time, and they made sure that bottles and milk were safe for children, and they were a force to be reckoned with in their communities. In the middle of all of this, the Civil War began, and she made a point of inviting them to be neutral during the Civil War, even though it was breaking up some of these cities that they were working in. And so these circles of women helped the soldiers from both sides of the war, the North and the South. And as they were in their communities and needed help, they would feed them and clothe them and give them medical attention. And after the war, she realized that the next thing that was needed was reconciliation. And so once again, she organized these gatherings of people, families that had been broken because of the war. Maybe they had people on different sides of it in their families or in their communities. She organized these events for them to come together and begin the process of reconciliation. And these went on for several years. And later in her life, her daughter wanted to honor her. So she lobbied for the government to make this a national holiday. And that is how we get Mother's Day. And so I think it's this beautiful story of a woman seeing what could be done better in her community, of preparing a place for future generations that she wanted to see happen. It's a story that we're familiar with in our Christian context because it's a story of being invited into preparing a place for people, a place of equality and a place of loving care and a place where everyone has access to things. Father Greg Boyle says that we're invited to participate in creating a world that God might recognize. And I love that image, that we are together working to create a place that God might recognize. There's so many different examples of this in our own communities. Each of us has a part in preparing our world for future generations, for our children and our children's children. And each of us can do this in different ways. I had the pleasure of speaking to some people this week and asking them the question, what do you want to do to prepare our world for future generations? I had a chance to speak to Laura Hughes, who you remember was involved with our outreach ministries. And I spoke to Lisa and Sam Palmer, who are raising twins, Isla and Barrett. And I will invite you to have a listen to what they had to say. And we welcome the Palmer family, Sam and Lisa, Isla and Barrett. And we welcome you this morning, members of our congregation, and we're so happy that you're here for this conversation. So the big question of the day, how are you doing?
I think we're doing okay is the kind way to put it. I think, COVID and social isolation has been difficult for us in the first year of parenthood. we really have relied on our community, our faith community, our greater community. And we know we're not alone, but it's definitely a different kind of communication and connection with our community currently.
These kids sitting on the couch are just so adorable. They're just a joy for all of us to watch. You know, we're talking about this idea of preparing a place and how we might be preparers for others. Sharing our stories, I think, is part of preparing a place. And what do you hope to prepare the world for future generations? For Isla and Barrett and for all the others who are just one or just coming into being right now?
I think part of what we'd like to prepare is just open hearts for love and acceptance, and being there for one another, kindness and generosity. We, like, as I mentioned before, we really couldn't have made it through our first year and a bit without our greater community. And I think just instilling that in our children and in our family is something that's really vital. We long for the days of the Hillhurst musicals and the gatherings again, and kid space, and to see everyone connected again. And that's kind of what we're preparing ourselves for again and looking forward to.
Well, we thank you for spending some of your day with us. And we give you big, big hugs, virtual hugs. Isla and Barrett, you are beautiful, and we will hopefully get to see you all in close proximity really soon.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about who you are and your connection to Hillhurst?
Well, we are originally Winnipeggers who moved to Calgary 28 years ago, lived there for 27 years, and then moved back to Winnipeg. And in the last 4 years or so, we discovered Hillhurst and got really, really engaged. It was a wonderful, wonderful place.
You were so instrumental in the life of our congregation, and I know many people will recognize you and all the work that you did. And while you were at Hillhurst, you worked in our Everyday Outreach program. And in a lot of ways, that ministry is about preparing a place. And so I was hoping you might talk about that a little bit and how you saw your work there and the work that continues on.
Preparing a place can refer to a lot of different things, so I'll take that from more than one angle. The first angle is just the practical of setting up the tables, making the food, being ready for the guests. And one of the things that made it so fulfilling is that we prepared a place of honor for everyone. It was a place to honor them. We made everything good to the point where if I thought a tablecloth was crooked, I straightened it. It had to be the best we could possibly do. The guests blossomed under that kind of care and attention. They felt loved because they were loved. And all of this preparing a place was a gesture of love. It was also creating an environment where the guests would feel safe and feel a sense of trust. To find a place where you're not only liked, but you're loved, you're respected, you're fed, you're warmed, is transformational for the guest. And we didn't know we were doing that. We didn't know until a year or two later when guests told us that. Also preparing a place for them to be their best. The volunteers brought their best to outreach, their best selves to outreach. The guests did the same thing. To have an environment where you bring your best and you like yourself and you're proud of yourself, that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And that's how we all felt, guests and volunteers alike. So that's another way we prepared a place for that to happen.
It seems like preparing a world or a place is really those one-on-one relationships, or how we treat just one person at a time, right? And creating this space of love and care with each person that we have a sandwich with, right? Or whatever it's going to be. It could be as simple as that. If we take the time to do that and to be those values and be those things that we want to birth into the world, we don't have to do them in some huge, great, events, but they can be these smaller acts. This work that this team was creating to prepare this place of love and care. And I wonder about each of us and how we might be a part of preparing a place for others. Have any thoughts on that, of how we might do that in our own lives?
Well, a lot of us want kind of the glory role. We don't want to be the ones who plant the seeds or water the seeds. We want to be the ones who reap the harvest. But if you can be the ones who plant the seeds and do the things that aren't as visible or as obviously rewarding, that's an essential part of preparing a place.
When we're all sitting here thinking about how we might want things to look when we finally emerge out of our homes, in the future weeks and months ahead, how do you want to prepare the world for future generations?
I think this whole COVID thing has gone a long way toward preparing the world. And if we can hang on to all the positive things that so many people have paid such a high price for, if we can hang on to those, things like improved environment, things like more family time, realizing how much connectedness matters, that we are all connected. And so if we take that and we connect again genuinely, it's the new normal. And if that continues, that's a positive thing, this connectedness and this recognition that this is a worldwide situation, and so many boundaries and so many competitions have had to go out the window. So there's a unity here and a cooperation that didn't exist before. That's another one. We need to hold on to that.
We all have these little glimpses or tastes of what could be and what is already.
Yes.
We can't ignore that the day is Mother's Day today. And I was wondering if you could just speak about what Mother's Day is for you. It has a lot of layers for all of us.
It does have a lot of layers. It's so very complicated. And I think probably because there's no roadmap and because your children aren't finished until they're dead. My mother always said that, don't worry if so-and-so is doing such and such. He's not fully baked yet. So you don't know how you did necessarily. You don't know what the yardstick is. It's just gray. It's not black and white. And I think we would really like affirmations that are black and white, and we would like to know that we've done a good job. But all we do know is whether we've done our best or not. So moms, take the love you're getting today and just cherish it and just enjoy it.
Well, we send you a big, warm virtual hug to you.
Thank you. And right back to you.
Thank you for your part of preparing a place for each of us in the world. So on this Mother's Day, perhaps the best thing that we can do is to step into the work that Anne Jarvis began years ago of creating and preparing a world that was more equitable and more safe for more people. Each of us has the invitation to be a preparer in the world. Each of us, children and adults, no matter who we are, we're all invited into that work to make a place and a world that is better for our children and for our children's children. We already heard from Laura about planting these seeds and seeing how they might blossom. And we've heard from Lisa and Sam about how they want to create a space that is loving and caring and inclusive for everybody, for their kids and for all kids. How might we be preparers? We go through our daily life. How might we be looking for those places in our world that need attention, where we might be part of the solution and creating an environment that is safer and more welcoming and more loving for others? How can we do this? This is the invitation that our gospel gives us this morning as well. John is writing the story about Jesus talking to his disciples, and Jesus leaves them these words of hope that God prepares a place for them. And so we too can step into that invitation to prepare our world for others. May it be so. Amen. As we begin this new week, as we venture out of our homes and into the world, may we know that God goes before us, that God has prepared a place of peace and compassion, love and connectedness. May we believe this and live it so that we might prepare the world for others. Go in God's peace. Amen.
It's easy if you try. No head lower of the stormy sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no country. This is hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. No religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say that I am a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you